But I urge you to hearken back to our founding fathers, because they put it all on the line, and just about every single one of them lost it after that. But they did it because they believed in those natural rights. They believed in the philosophy of liberty enough to sacrifice their life, because like I've recently come to realize, it's much bigger than myself, this idea of liberty. It's much bigger than me. It's much bigger than everybody in this room. So on from the Declaration of Independence, which states, I might add, this is my favorite part of the Declaration of Independence, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government. Prudence indeed will dictate that government long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And here's the key part, and here's what we have going on exactly right now. They're negotiating it here in Copenhagen. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. So we see that long train of abuses right now coming through with the United Nations, with the global government agenda. So it's about time for a little fun here. And again, along with the Declaration of Independence, our founding fathers basically declared independence from the British monarchy, and then they decided, hey, we need to institute a new government, one that will ensure that this tyranny does not set foot, because they studied history. They knew that revolutions come in cycles. And while we may overthrow the tyranny now to replace it, what always happens, unfortunately, is when these individuals get in these positions of power, like Lord Acton said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So they wanted to set in these guards to where even if individuals had the reins of government, they still would not be able to use it for tyranny and in order to exploit the people for their own ends. So they basically gave us the United States Constitution, which had in it Article 1, Section 8, very few specified, enumerated powers that the government could actually involve itself in and engage itself in. And along with that, they came my two favorite parts of the United States Constitution, the 10th and 9th Amendment, which basically said any powers not delegated to the federal government are left to the people and to the states. There's some very beautiful things, and unfortunately it's kind of got tossed along the wayside, but we do see a resurgence of those 10th Amendment ideals, of that idea of decentralization. I'm going to get into that here in a little bit. Also with the Constitution we had the Supremacy Clause, which basically said anything that is repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. It's very, null and void. Now, it's a very crucial aspect of the question, and I'll get into it here in a little bit. But for the United States Constitution, obviously, it was Ben Franklin that said, you have a republic if you can keep it. So what it comes down to for me is the question of who is the final arbiter when it comes to questions of constitutionality. Is the federal government allowed to regulate airwaves within our state? Is the federal government allowed to push you to coerce you into buying health care? That's the question, the constitutional questions. Well, the states and the establishment would have us believe, thanks to Marbury v. Madison shortly after our country's founding, that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of questions of constitutionality. I, for one, reject that entirely, because I think it's counterintuitive to give the state itself the ability to check itself, because as history has shown, they will never voluntarily give up any power whatsoever. It's like allowing the fourth grade class to grade their own tests. You know, some of them, you know, the evil ones, the corrupt ones, the little tyrants, the young little tyrants running around are going to take advantage of the system, and unfortunately we see that happening over and over and over. Harlan mentioned earlier we're involved in a battle against police blood withdrawals. Well, the Supreme Court says that it's okay. I don't care. They're wrong. There are also pot sobriety checkpoints recently. The Supreme Court says that's okay as long as you have guidelines. I don't care. They're wrong. When I answer the question of constitutionality, I'm the one that decides constitutionality, myself and every single person in this room. And we need to be aware of that. There's a lot of evil people that have control over the reins of our government right now, and they would have you believe that they're acting in your best interest. They would have you believe they have a system of checks and balances that actually works, when in reality, the checks and balances themselves are just simply a means of justifying their tyranny, justifying their intrusion into our lives. It's by time that we reject that. So I call on everybody to simply make a choice and choose to be free. It's up to us as individuals whether we're going to live under this control of the tyrants, whether we're going to live as slaves or we're going to live as free men. So I call on everybody to make that choice. Choose to be free. Even if it means breaking a few laws here and there, I'm here to tell you that's okay. It's going to be all right, folks. Because, you know, governments, they would have you believe that law and government are synonymous and inseparable, when in reality nothing can be farther from the truth. They would have you believe that because of law we have freedom, when in reality it's because of freedom that we have law. It's because we were free men that we instituted these governments to protect our life, liberty, and property. But now, unfortunately, we dropped the ball, and the government, especially the federal government, is doing the exact opposite thing of what we instituted the government to do. And it's time for some change. So while I'm big on electoral politics, I think that's a very important part, and we got a wonderful candidate running for governor, by the way, of Deborah Medina. We can't allow ourselves to stop at the ballot box. Now, we must move further on. We got to take it to the streets and confront the system head on. Just like Martin Luther King said. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King is, "Man has a responsibility to disobey unjust laws." That's how they rather than going, and they tried. The old left, Maury Rothbard details the old left compared to the new left, the radicals of the 1960s that fought for civil rights and also fought against the Vietnam War. The old left, their status quo, their strategy was to go to the halls of Congress and say, "Hey, Mr. Congressman, we're human beings too. Can you respect that, please?" Of course, you know, the status quo, they just turn their backs on them. They don't listen to us, especially at the federal level. So what Martin Luther King did in his civil rights movement is they went and they faced it head on. There was laws that said black men cannot drink from this water fountain. A man has a responsibility to disobey unjust laws. They drank from that water fountain. There was laws that said man cannot come into this public place and sit with white men. Black men can't. They went ahead and sat in the sit-ins. Rosa Parks is one of my heroes. She's a very radical, revolutionary woman, and all she did was simply sit at the front of the bus. She simply chose to be free. And what this did was it demonstrated, not only to the establishment, but more importantly to the people, the absurdity of the segregation laws. It illustrated the absurdity because these people were so dedicated to the cause that they would put their life on the line and they would simply choose to be free and walk out there and live life according to the inherent rights of freedom that they do have. And by God, it's time that we start bringing back that revolutionary fervor to our particular battle. So I'm a big fan of and that can come in any form. We have a local micro broadcaster. I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with 90.1 FM. So the establishment, the federal government would have you believe that in order to get the truth out, in order to get the news out, in order to exercise your First Amendment right, you would have to get permission from the federal government in the form of an FCC license. I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that is not so. We've been broadcasting 90.1 in the city of Austin for several years now, and the FCC time and time again has come with their coercive arm trying to compel us to quit broadcasting, trying to fine us thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, what happened in the past was people would lay down. But finally, I'm so proud to say that some very strong, courageous activists are putting it on the line, and they're simply choosing to be free, and they're not shutting down that transmission. And you can hear my voice right now going all over